So about, 11 years ago, I passed my driving test in the UK. So I did a 2-week intensive course over the Christmas holidays while I was away before I went back to Rome for my training. And I basically told the vocations director, I said, when I'm a priest, you need me to be driving, right? And he said, yes. I said, well, guess what? You can pay for my driving lessons. And it worked. Okay, so I passed my test, and then I flew back to Rome the next day, and they let me drive the car. So, now, I've got to say, if you want to learn how to drive very skillfully, do it in Italy. Because the roads out there, there's no, it doesn't feel like there are any laws. It feels like everything is advice, you know? The speed limit, it's advice. The speed cameras, it's advice. And that's how it treats on the road. So I come back to England a year and a half later, quite a skillful driver. But I get into lots of trouble. Who knew that you couldn't tailgate people 2 inches from the back of them behind them? Who knew that? Right? And those speed cameras, they started flashing at me all of a sudden. What's that about? So within 3 years in fact, of being back, I was in court. Now, don't worry, I didn't kill anyone. Okay? I basically racked, you need 12 points of your license. I'd racked up 12 points in 3 years. And I'd been summoned to the court, to the judge, to basically discuss whether they take my license away. So, like a good little boy, I wore my best collar, my suit, and I pleaded. I said, look, if you take my license away, then people will suffer. Then I can't visit the hospital. And they brought it hook, line and sinker. So, 7 years later, I'm a changed man. 0 points on the license. I'd like to say I'm an exemplary driver, but I'm not. But I did improve, but it wasn't that moment. It wasn't that moment I said, now, James, you'll drive like a safe driver. In fact, any change of lifestyle, any change of habit comes with continual and daily practice through repetition. And one of the things that's helped me become a much better driver has been driving to my brother's house. Now, what do I mean by that? On the way to my brother's house, he's about half an hour away on the other side of the river. About 5 minutes from his house, there's a narrow road, and on this narrow road you've got a school, a primary school on the left, much like St. Joachim's. And on this road, they've put a statue of a 7-year-old girl right on the curb. And I remember, as I was driving the first time, my heart, so I'm speeding down, my heart jumps out of my mouth. It's like, ah, child! I thought I was going to hear a kid. And then I realised, oh, it's a statue. So did I say to myself, James, you'll never drive like that again? No, I completely forgot. And the next time I went down, my heart jumped out of my mouth again, and again, and again. And it took me a long while to realise, this is that road. Okay, but I didn't speed, I went very, very slowly. I'd formed a habit. And now, whenever I see like children's crossings or 20-mile-an-hour signs, I'm like, the habit has got me behaving in a different way. These signs can help us to develop habits which are good. It's very rare that a person just goes like that. It's like giving up smoking, isn't it? It takes time to develop a new way of life. There's a statue in Rome of a beggar. It's outside one of the hospitals in Rome. And this statue is also a habit-forming statue. Has anyone noticed anything about the statue? Anything distinctive? No? Have a look at the hand. That's not like that. What do you see? You see a hole. So who is the beggar?
Jesus.
Christ, isn't it? It's designed to help us to notice who we're walking past when we walk past someone who is in need. Sadly, even in today's day and age, in our modern country, the 6th biggest economy in the world, we see too much of this, don't we? People begging on the street. And what happens over time? We develop a habit of going, well, I can't solve the problem, and so we walk by. This statue, every time you walk by it, is reminds me that I'm walking past an opportunity to serve Christ. That in this poor person is the presence of Jesus, who is calling out to me and inviting me to be the Christian I profess myself to be. First reading, Isaiah. Share your bread with the hungry and shelter the homeless poor. Clothe the man you see to be naked and turn not from your own kin. Do you notice there's no mention of give monthly to charity or support this charitable cause, as good as that is, it's all very concrete, isn't it? If you see suffering, if you see want, if you see need, meet it here and now. St. Paul shares the same spirit. In the second reading, he says this: "The only knowledge I claim to have was about Jesus and only about him as Christ crucified." You see, St. Paul could have been preaching the glorified Christ. We're on the other side of the resurrection now, aren't we? He could be preaching about that Christ. But his conversion was to the crucified one. The crucified one, our God, is the God who associates himself not with power, but with the poor and lonely. Like those men and women, we can so easily become accustomed to walking by. Paul preaches the crucified Christ, the poor Christ. That's who he's attached to. Do we think St. Paul, like he fell off his horse and had his conversion, but do we think it was all done in that moment? What had he spent his life doing up until that moment? He was persecuting and murdering Christians, those men and women who had associated themselves with Christ. Whether he knew it or not, Paul was learning the habit of seeing the one that he was persecuting, and now he gave his life to him. And that's what it's all about for Paul. It's about concrete actions and concrete love. God manifesting himself, not in words, but in actions. That's what he says. There were none of the arguments that belong to philosophy, but only a demonstration of the power of the Spirit. He echoes those words of St. James: "I by my works will show you my faith." Concrete actions. Now the church, in its wisdom over 2,000 years, has developed, based on scripture, 7 what we call corporal works of mercy. 7 concrete things that we can do in order to meet the Lord. Here they are. Feed the hungry, give drink to the thirsty, clothe the naked, shelter the homeless, visit the sick, visit the imprisoned, bury the dead. Everything that we do in Christian charity is in addition to these fundamental things, the corporal works of mercy. So we're not saying that every noble cause we support isn't good. It is, and we should continue to support it. But always remember that the Lord associates himself not with causes, but with human beings. And he calls us to do the same. He came down from heaven and took on flesh like ours out of compassion. You hear it in one of the prefaces: out of compassion for the waywardness that is ours. And we come close to Christ, the crucified Christ, in the same way, out of compassion for the brother or sister who is in need. Jesus says this: "Your light must shine in the sight of men, so that seeing your good works, they may give praise to your Father in heaven." Your light must shine. Lights are seen. You don't explain a light, do you? It's either on or it's off. And that is seen through the good works that we do, how we associate with the most lowly. Now, our parish is very strong, and we talk about evangelization all the time, don't we? And so we should. And we've often spoken about it in terms of like invite people to the church, come to Alpha, all those things, to give a person a chance to encounter Christ through the various things that we do. But what Jesus is teaching us, what the readers are teaching us today, is that we have an opportunity to encounter him whenever we take a moment out of our day, a moment out of our week, to serve those left well off than us, those truly in need, because Christ dwells in them. It's not only that. First reading, we go back to the first reading. "Then your light will shine like the dawn, and your wound be quickly healed over." Why do we find it easy to ignore those who are in trouble? I'm not saying we do it all the time, but we can do it, can't we? I think sometimes, and I speak for myself, when I see fragility in another person, when I see weakness and frailty, there's an element of fear there. Because in that person, I see that which is weak and frail in me. The wound that I would rather cover over that nobody sees. Those who are in need, those who are suffering, who are hungry, can point to our suffering and hunger that we would rather cover over. But the gospel teaches us, the whole of Scripture teaches us, that the cure, the healing that we desire, isn't in turning away from the wounds of others and turning away from our own wounds, but reaching out to heal them. The response to all of our pain is compassion. The response to all of our wounds is love. So we are called, as Christians, as followers of the crucified Christ, to heal the wounds of others so that we may heal the wounds of the world and the wounds in our own hearts. Amen. Amen.